do it.
Hey guys, this is Versatile from Project Phoenix Media. In today's video tutorial, I'm going to show you finally how to use a Raspberry Pi 3 with OpenMediaVault with your PS2, fat or slim, assuming it's modded, or somehow it's able to run, for example, FreeMakeBoot and OpenPS2 Loader. Using that combination, using the Raspberry Pi 3 and OpenMediaVault, what you can do is a pretty badass solution. Imagine loading games from a USB connected to your Raspberry Pi 3, going through the Ethernet cable to your PS2, and that's getting you the maximum ultimate gaming performance for this particular solution, and it's awesome. So let me show you how this works. I did a proof of concept video before, but let me show you how to do it finally, and it's a lot of good times. If you go to the video description, I'll have a link to where you can download two main items. One is OpenMediaVault. The other one is Win32 Disk Imager. It's basically a program that allows you to write images to a micro SD card, and that's another thing that you're going to need. You need a micro SD card, minimum 4 gigabytes. I just happen to use an 8 gigabyte micro SD, but 4 gigabytes should also be fine too. So make sure you have that, and also a way like a micro SD USB card reader. Or maybe you have a laptop so it can just read it by itself with an adapter. Nonetheless, here's my desktop. Inside my desktop, I already downloaded ahead of time the image file from the main OpenMediaVault website, and I'll have a link in the video description of where that is. And at the time of this recording is 3.0.41. Make sure you get the one that has RPI2, RPI3, and it's going to be an image.gc. So on Windows, I have this program called 7-Zip. So what I did was literally just go to 7-Zip, right click, 7-Zip, extract here. It extracted itself. So it went from like a 439 megabyte file, 429 megabytes file, into approximately like a 3.7 gigabyte file. So from there, what you want to do is insert your micro SD card or reader into your computer or laptop, and then run this program called Win32 Disk Imager. If you don't have it, I have a link in the video description. You download it and install it. Follow the wizard. It's pretty simple. So let's go ahead, run that program. So here's the program. On the right hand side, it's going to detect all your USB devices, so make sure you select the correct partition letter that corresponds to your micro USB, your micro SD card. So I just happen to know it's the letter I. Please double check it. You can go to your, my computer here and double check it here, or maybe you go down here to your USB ejection window here and just find it. So here I just know that it's the letter I. I am not held responsible if you select the wrong USB drive, so please, please, please make sure you select the correct drive, guys. Okay, so it's letter I. Image file, I'm going to click on this folder here. I'm going to navigate to my desktop, and then go here and select the .img image file. Now what we're going to do is click on the write button, and it's going to have this message. I'm going to say yes, and it's going to start writing. And then that's it. That's one part of the process, is writing the image file to your micro SD card. And then how it works afterwards is, after this process is done, you eject it, plug it into your Raspberry Pi 3, connect your HDMI cable, connect your USB thumb drive that has your PS2 games, which I'll get to in a second, and then you connect your micro USB cable. Please make sure, for the least hassle experience, that you have a charger or a USB adapter that can output 2.0 amps or higher. One time I tried using a charger that was 1 amp max capacity, and I realized that it was not able to detect my USB drive, or didn't have enough power to support my USB thumb drive, and I could not mount it inside the OpenMediaVault. So please make sure you have a charger that can do at least 2.0 amps or higher for minimizing any type of issues. Okay, so while this is writing to the micro SD card, let me show you how to set up your USB thumb drive for your PS2 to hold all your games. So what I did is, let's go into my thumb drive here, and it is going to be this one here. So this is the trick. This is how I do it, and I found out that it works the best this way. So what you want to do is first make a folder on your FAT32 thumb drive. Just make a new folder and call it, you don't have to call this, but that's what I do. So if you want to make it easier yourself, maybe just follow along, and just call it PS2 SMB. Inside your PS2 SMB, this is where you have all your other stuff that OPL uses. So originally all this stuff here was on the root of my USB, because I used to play on USB through OPL sometimes. So what I did was literally cut and paste all this stuff, and I put into a new folder called PS2 SMB, which is on the root of my USB thumb drive. And then here, this is where you take your games. So let's say you made a DVD folder. Inside your DVD folder, you dump your ISO games that are less than 4 gigabytes. If you have a game that happens to be larger than 4 gigabytes, then use a previous video tutorial that I did that shows you how to split your games properly. You can use USB util, or you can use USB Extreme as well. It'll basically rip those games, convert them, split them, and put into the root of your folder here, basically. Or you have to put those files there, basically. And I'm not going to talk about in today's video tutorial, but I'm sure you can use this exact same method to play your pop starter games as well through Ethernet. And I'm going to check that out at a later time, but I'm sure it's going to work just as awesome as well. So that's the hardest part, guys. Make sure you have your USB thumb drive. Make a new folder. You can call it whatever you want. I just call it a PS2 SMB. Inside that folder, put all your OPL related stuff in there, and then make a DVD folder or a CD folder and put your respective ISO files in there. Or make sure you have your games properly ripped and put in the root of this folder here, basically. And that's it. That's the hardest part there, because I think a lot of people get tripped up on that when they're trying to share through OpenMediaVault and it doesn't work for whatever reason. Okay, so we see that a write is successful. Excellent. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to eject my USB thumb drive that has my PS2 games. And then I'm going to go ahead and eject my micro SD card. Okay, that's it. So now what we're going to do is, in the next portion of the video tutorial, I'm going to connect everything up real quick to my TV and show you what it looks like on first time boot up. Make sure you have an Ethernet cord and make sure you have it connected to your router, because we need to know what is the IP address. If you don't have a TV nearby your router, what you could do, worst case scenario, is connect your Raspberry Pi 3 to your router, wait like about a minute and a half or so, log into your router. Hopefully you have something called like a device list, and from there you can determine what is the IP address assigned to your Raspberry Pi 3, and then from there you can use your computer and use a web browser to log in. So I'll show you what I'm talking about in a little bit here, but let's go ahead and jump into the next portion of this video tutorial. Let's do this. Okay, so this next portion of the video tutorial, I'm going to show you what your Raspberry Pi 3 looks like when you're booting the OpenMediaVault for the first time. So here's my Raspberry Pi 3. I got the USB, I got the Ethernet cord going to my router, I got the HDMI, I got the micro SD that's plugged in. So what I'm going to do is go ahead, I'm going to plug in my micro USB for power, and let's do this. Okay, so let's go back to the TV. And hopefully I got it set up to the right port. If not, let's do this. Okay, so it's on boot up. It always takes the longest on the first time, but then after you use it again and again, the startup time is much quicker. Eventually, after we finally finish the boot process, it will display a line that tells you what is your Ethernet IP address, and then you want to make note of that IP address, because we're going to use that to open up the web browser and do all the admin stuff on there. So what we're going to do later on is set up a static IP address. So anyways, if you can see in this corner here, it says my IP address is 192.168.1.143. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave it connected. Let's go back to my computer and I'll show you the setup of how this works. Let's do this. Alright, so we're back at our computer, and the next step is I'm going to show you how to set up your OpenMediaVault through the web interface. It's pretty simple. So in the previous section, we saw that the router assigned my IP address of 192.168.1.143 to the Raspberry Pi 3. So we're going to type that into, let's use File Explorer, Windows Explorer, but you can use your web browser as well. So 192.168.1.143. So for your particular Raspberry Pi 3, type in your IP address. Okay, so language, English, username, the default is admin, lowercase, and the password is OpenMediaVault, one word, all lowercase. Okay. Alright, so there are some things in here that I'm not going to do today, but let me just talk about it in general. One, you probably want to change your webmin admin password, change it from the default. It's just a safe measure there. Second item is whenever you get a chance, you probably want to update the plugins and probably the distro itself. So if you go to update management, you can say check here. There's a list of things that come up, and then you can go ahead and update your OpenMediaVault. But it takes some time, so I'm not going to do it today, but that's just something I'm going to toss out there. But if you're going to play this with your Raspberry Pi 3 and your PS2, you don't have to do the updates. It's just out there. It might be a good thing to do, but for today's tutorial, I'm not going to do that. So just keep that in mind. Next thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and assign a static IP address to the Raspberry Pi 3, because most likely you're going to have it disconnected from the router. You're going to have it connected to your PlayStation 2, and you don't have to use a crossover cable. I forgot to mention this earlier. You can use just a regular Cat 5 or Cat 6 cable, and the Raspberry Pi 3 and the PS2 will do that crossover feature by itself, which is pretty cool. But anyways, on the left-hand side, go to Network, and then go to Interfaces, and then click on this. It should be the ETH0. Go to Edit, and then what we're going to do is assign a static IP address to IPv4. So here it says the method DHCP. Let's go ahead and go to static. And then this is where the magic happens. So let's go ahead and give it a static IP address, whatever you want. I'm going to keep mine simple. I'm going to match whatever the router gave mine. So I'm going to say 192.168.1.143. Net mask is going to be 255.255.255.0. And the gateway, just to keep things simple, I'm going to keep the same IP address as the router, 192.168.1.1, and say save. Okay, once it's saved, you're going to get another thing here. It says apply, so let's say apply, and let's say yes. So now we've assigned a static IP address, so whenever you disconnect it from your router connected to your PS2, you're going to have this particular IP address, whatever you assigned it, okay? So the 1.143 is my example. You can use whatever IP address you want, 192.168.1.10 or 20 or whatever you want to do. So anyways, IP address, static IP, that's done. Great. Now let's go to File Systems, and we want to mount our USB drive. So here's my USB drive. How did I know? I just happen to know, experience, but you can't go wrong if you see something that's not mounted. So let's go ahead and click on this and then mount it. And then we're going to say apply and say yes. And one tip is, you have your USB drive connected because it's like a VFAT file system type. Even though it's formatted as FAT32, that's what the OpenMediaVault may recognize it as, a VFAT. Okay, so let's mount it. Great. Now the next thing we want to do is do the shared folders. Okay, so shared folders, left-hand side under Access Rights Management. And we're going to click on Add. And I'm going to do things a little bit backwards here, but it works, trust me. So we're going to do device. Select the device. We're going to select my USB drive, which is this guy right here. The path, I'm going to click on this folder icon, and I'm going to select the top level PS2 SMB, say OK. Permissions, I'm going to go down here, everyone, read write, and then we'll go back to the name, and we'll call it PS2 SMB. The reason why I went backwards like that is just in the rare event the name might have an influence on the path, so I figured out it's easier to go device, path, permissions, and go back to name last. So save. If you get an error message, that's perfectly okay. We're going to continue, say cancel here. And then we're going to see, hopefully, like a yellow thing that comes up that says apply, but maybe, maybe not. So we'll see. So now we go to down here to SMB/CIFS. We're going to enable it. We're going to click on save. And it should ask you to apply, so let's do that. Okay, so once that is done, we're going to set up the share saving over Samba share. So let's go click on shares, the tab, add, select the shared folder. Remember that folder we just shared a minute ago? So let's go ahead and select that. Public, we're going to say the painless solution and just do guess aloud, and let's save it. And now it's going to ask you to apply up here. Yep, apply. Yes. And then, if you can believe it, that's pretty much it. And then if you want to check it before we connect it to the PS2, you can check it through Windows to make sure that your share is working. How do you know if your share is working? Well, I'm using Windows 10. I'm sure it applies to Windows 8.1 and 7 and maybe XP. But we're going to go to Network. So let's go to Network. And hopefully, once this refreshes, it'll show my Raspberry Pi. Here we go. So I double click on it. PS2 SMB, awesome. I double click on it, and here's all the stuff that we shared on the USB drive. So when OPL, when you set it up correctly through a network configuration, which I'll show later in this video, the PS2 will see this PS2 SMB share. It's going to go inside here, and it's going to see all this stuff, and then you're good to go. So it recognizes how to process all these different files. So you have a DVD folder, you have your game, the PS2 is going to see it through OPL, and you're going to have a lot of good times. Or maybe you have some games ripped down here in the root, not a problem. It's going to recognize it, and you can play. You're going to have a lot of good times here. So all you got to do now basically is just power down your Raspberry Pi and connect it to your PS2 and get ready for a lot of good times. So in a nutshell, what we ended up doing today over here inside OpenMediaVault is we assigned a static IP address. So we did a static IP address, and then after that, you want to mount your USB drive or your hard drive, whatever you're using. You mount that sucker, and then you go down to shared folders, and you want to set up the correct shared folder path, basically. And then last but not least, you go to the SMB portion of it, enable it, and then go to shares here and make sure you share that folder. And then that's finally it. So now in the future, all you got to do is rip more games, put more games on your USB thumb drive, USB hard drive, just keep on dumping it and dumping it and dumping it. And then you got to turn on your Raspberry Pi 3 and then go to your OPL. It'll see all your games, and you're just like a boss, and you're going to have a lot of good times there. So in the next portion of the video tutorial, the last portion, we're going to show you the final setup, Raspberry Pi 3 connected to the PS2, and let's do some network configuration in the OPL. It's very not much you have to do. It's painless, and that's about it. So with that said, let's jump straight into the next portion of the video tutorial. Let's do this. Alright, so in this next portion of the video tutorial, I'm going to show you how to set up your Raspberry Pi 3 with your PS2. So, Raspberry Pi 3, USB connected, Ethernet connected, USB micro cable connected to a charger that is 2.0 amps or higher capability. If you're using a charger that has 1 amps maximum capacity, it may not work properly. Your USB drives may not work, so please get a higher ampacity charger if you can. So we're going back to my TV here. Free McBoot. So let's go ahead. Let's go to Open PS2 Loader. And let me show you the settings under the network configuration. And as long as your settings are similar to mine, then you really should not have any issues with the PS2 loading your games through the Ethernet from the Raspberry Pi 3 from the USB. It's awesome. So if I go to Ethernet, here's my game. It's already recognized, but let me show you the settings. So if I press Start, go down to Network Configuration. Here, you want to make sure that your IP address type is set to static. It may be originally DHCP, but make sure it says static. And then go ahead and type in the IP address. So like for example, for the PS2, I just called it 192.168.1.10. You can call it whatever you want. Subnet mask 255.255.255.0. That's fine. The gateway, I just arbitrarily picked 192.168.1 and 1 for the gateway and the DNS server. Now down here, this is where it's important. So address type, make sure it is set to IP. Address, that's the static IP address of your Raspberry Pi. I just happen to give it 192.168.1.143. Yours may be something totally different, which is fine. Just make sure you put the correct IP address of your Raspberry Pi 3 into here. Share, this is important. So remember earlier in the video tutorial, I talked about sharing it as a PS2 SMB. Originally, this may be blank, so make sure you give it the same name as your shared folder. So remember, we called it PS2 SMB. That'll make it real simple, and that's it. And then for a user, just in case, I just made it guest. Originally, it might be blank on your OPL, but if you have it set up as guest, and then just save it that way, and then say reconnect, and then OK, you should be good to go. Save the settings. So you know it's working if you go to the Ethernet and you see your list of games. So here's my game. So let's go ahead, run the game real quick just to show you that yes, this does work and how good the performance is. And like I said, I did this in a proof of concept video previously, and now you guys will actually see how to do it yourself. And once you do a couple games, it's not really that hard. I think the hardest part is understanding how to set up your USB, how to set up the OpenMediaVault properly with the shared folders. And after that, all you got to do in the future is just get more games, dump it into your USB, get more and more games, dump into your USB, and then you're good to go. One other quick tip, when you first turn on your Raspberry Pi 3, maybe give it about a minute, and then turn on your PS2. That way your Raspberry Pi 3 will be ready when your PS2 goes to OPL for the Ethernet interface. So for the games that I've tested so far through Ethernet, it's a pretty good solution. If you're looking for a solution where your games will be much smoother than, say, USB, for sure. And in terms of lagging for your in-game movie sequences, they really should not lag at all. So it's a really good solution. You know, I had a Raspberry Pi 3 sitting around, and I thought, hey, this might be a good tutorial for this kind of use. So let's go ahead, new game. And I'm just going to go through a little bit of the movie here just to show you guys that it's really smooth, and hopefully the games that you are testing, you will have the same kind of experience as well. Okay, let's skip this one. So anyways, that is today's video game tutorial. You guys have any nitpicky questions, leave a comment here on the YouTube page and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Once again, thank you for watching. Take care. Bye.